All right, Rahul. Cheers.
All right.
Welcome to Founders Raw.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it's great. Thank you for joining us. This is a nice opportunity to get to know each other as well as get your story. What I would like to do is start from the beginning.
Sure.
You know, where did you grow up? What did you study? And how did you get into this industry?
Okay. By industry, I assume you mean the gaming industry in general?
Well, the tech
or
industry.
Yeah,
let's start from the beginning.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
And Calgary is notorious for being a cowboy town, and it's oil and gas, and there was no tech when I was growing up there, so it was always interesting seeing the type of jobs that were available and the type of companies that were coming up and that sort of thing. But I was in high school, and I was one of those people that was always trying to build something and just do my own thing. I was never really into going to school in the first place.
Yeah.
And the last 6 months of high school, I took all spares, which basically meant I could do whatever I wanted. And I started a computer company.
So in high school?
In high school, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was so into gaming and computers. I just couldn't imagine myself doing anything other than that. So I started this thing out of high school. And then after high school, I started going to college for about 6 months, trying to take a computer science degree, which was completely pointless at that time, because I mean, their prerequisite was learning WordPerfect for DOS kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I've been in this industry a long time, and Voodoo, the company I started, just took off. So I quit university and just started building that company.
Right. So I definitely want to get into that. But what did you see even at that time that was the draw to I got to create this company? And you're in high school. I mean, most people don't have that vision.
No, I mean, look, I didn't have that vision. I just thought I have to do something, right? And I really love this stuff. I love to play games, and I thought, looking at the industry in general, everything was super boring. I mean, there was Dell and HP and Micron, and these companies were building the most boring gray boxes for computer systems, and I started off with me wanting to build a system for myself, and I looked around, I couldn't find anything I wanted, and ultimately that's how it started. I got approached by somebody who was a wholesaler for computer parts. He thought I was an interesting person, a good salesperson, and he said, you should really look at this, because he saw me pulling apart a computer and putting it back together, and I did, and that's how it started. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you know much about creating a business at that point in
time?
time?
I knew nothing. I knew nothing about anything. I honestly have a background in mechanical engineering, hardware design, thermal engineering, all through building systems and doing it myself. It took years. It wasn't easy, but and then just a crash course in business just by running a company, right?
Which is probably it's the best.
It's a good way to learn. It's a lot easier now than it was then. Because now, with accelerators, I mean, I think you learn more in a 4-month accelerator than you would through any MBA program. But when I was doing this, there were no incubators, accelerators, there was no VC funding, and there was really not a lot of guidance or mentors.
Yeah.
So I got caught up in a lot of things, and I made mistakes with. I mean, I think by 19, I had made my first $1 million, and I lost it all in the stock market. While running my business, right? I did really stupid stuff growing up. And you just wouldn't learn that unless you went through it or or met people.
Yeah.
Told you
so you started Voodoo.
Yeah.
Was it Voodoo PC? Is that what it's called? All right. And then so then going through your early 20s, did you run that company for that long, or what did you do through that?
Yes, I ran the company. So I ran that company for 16 years ish. It was a long time, right? We had a lot of opportunities. So the first, it was like every 5 years we would do sort of a pivot, look at our strategy, see where we're going. But we were building a brand, and we had a lot of opportunities to grow the business. We could have gone into retail through major retailers across the country, across the North America, across the world. Yeah. We had, we were building a brand that became synonymous with Ferrari of PCs, and over time we realized that the value of our company was in our brand, and so rather than trying to commoditize, the PC or to commoditize the business, my brother, who's a big branding person, sort of suggested, like, why don't we just continue to grow and build our core brand and see where the multiple goes.
Interesting.
And that was it.
So when you say like Ferrari of PC, how did you approach creating essentially a luxury brand? Like, what makes a luxury brand regardless of what industry it's in?
Exactly. So how do you turn a commodity into a luxury? It's really what it was, because that's what a PC is, right? It's just a commodity. And so, a luxury brand is, a lot of startups go through this thing where they think the brand is the logo you put on a shirt or something, right? It's not. It's a brand is made up of, first of all, you have to have an amazing product with a following. You have to have a fan base, and then you have to have a team who live and breathe and eat and sleep the brand. So you have to create this amazing culture where, everyone you hire loves everything about what they do, to the point where they work day and night, just building this thing. So, a brand is a product of culture, amazing product, and a fan base, and that becomes the soul or the foundation of your brand. Which can be anything, right? And creating a luxury brand requires those components. The reason why Apple was so successful, even after they were hitting the grave, essentially, right? There was a point in time where they were dying, to the point where Dell said something like, Apple should sell their shares and return the money back to shareholders. And I think Kevin Rowland said something. By the way, Kevin Rowland was the CEO of Dell at the time, that Michael Dell hired. He said something like, the iPod is nothing more than a fad. I mean, these guys said the dumbest things, right? And yet Apple had one thing that none of them had, which was a massive fan base, right? And the fan base was there when Steve Jobs came on stage back to the company and said, like, we got to turn this thing around. And they were cheering for him. They were like, they were there roaring and raving. And HP doesn't have that, right? Dell doesn't have that.
But do you think, just to dive even further, do you think it really just comes from the founder and like their passion plus vision plus the way they even just like are the way they treat their employees as well as the users of the product? I mean, there's something special.
I don't know if it's the way the founder treats their employees. I think it's really the founder is the soul of the brand, right? So like if you look at any large company, like let's just take HP as an example. When Bill and Dave were alive, the HP way was something that was learned in Silicon Valley. It was the thing, right? They started Silicon Valley essentially, and it was all about innovation and just doing things differently than what other people would do, and they created a lot of interesting entrepreneurs and spawned a lot of companies. But then over time, as they left the company and other CEOs came in. Slowly they lost their identity and they lost their soul, they lost their culture, to where the fifth or sixth CEO basically destroyed the company, right? And they don't care. All they care about is their paycheck and their stock and their vesting, and they have no vested interest in the company. And you look at Microsoft as on the flip side. Microsoft's a great example of a company where you've got a living founder who still exists, who's dedicated his life to making the world better. His giving back philosophy emanates throughout the company, right? And so people can say what they want about Microsoft on the outside, but when you're on the inside and you actually see how it operates, the culture of giving is there, right? And plus, they've only had 3 CEOs in their history. Which is amazing. Which is major. It's major to keeping the foundation or the soul of the company close. And then Apple is another great example where Steve Jobs was the soul, and the heart and soul of that company. When he came back, it came back, and so having a living founder, having a founder. In the company is really important, and when the founder leaves, you have to make sure the transition is
interesting. So going back to Voodoo PC, you guys really locked on to the luxury part of as the computer industry,
right? We did. We went into an industry where there was no luxury at the time. We created the world's first fanless PC. So we created fanless PCs for gaming. We created liquid cooling, which people were like amazed that we were able to do this in mass. So we created liquid cooling systems that could be mass manufactured, that HP then took and put it in their workstations. We did some unbelievable things. For a small company out of Calgary, it was insane what we were able to do.
That's crazy. So going back, is there like, if there was one lesson that you took out of that? I mean, that's 16 years or
Yeah.
whatever, right? Like, what was the one lesson of your first real company?
Go faster.
Go faster.
No, I don't know. I think when I look back at it, I think, wow, that took a long time. I guess, it did. It took a long time because we refused to take funding. We refused to sort of go down the traditional path of growing. I'm almost kidding about the go faster part, but it did take a while to build what we wanted to build. It sort of looked like an up and to the right kind of company, but then at the end it was like this. It just spiked in the last 3 years, right? It went crazy. The valuation went crazy. The sales went crazy. Everything just spiked. We're at the right place at the right time. So, so the one thing I learned is how to strike the right place at the right time.
And sometimes it takes patience, right?
It does take patience, but it also takes a little bit of foresight. So, so I learned a lot when I was with Microsoft Ventures, and the stuff that we did with startups, being able to spot, trends and that sort of thing, and getting in the right space at the right time. You can strike, fire quickly, or strike a vein quickly, and go from there. So
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So then, acquired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after getting acquired by HP. Dell acquired Alienware, which is our biggest competitor, and we were going head to head for about a year. And essentially, the company kind of started to lose the plot. Not Voodoo, the company, but I think HP in general, because leadership changes, patience changed. They didn't understand brand. They didn't understand what it takes to actually build a community. The whole fan base thing I talked about earlier. They wouldn't have known what a fan base was if it hit them in the back of the head. That's a fact. The management team was just not quite there, right? And on the other side, here's a guy from Calgary who I didn't want to move to Palo Alto and work at HP. I wanted to sort of influence things from the outside, and I thought I knew probably more than I did, I guess. And maybe I came across as a little bit arrogant because I was frustrated. And it just turned out to be a big mess, right? They made some decisions that I said would blow the company up because of we'd lose the culture, we'd lose the plot. All of that happened, and so I was there physically for 3 years, but 1 year was my mind and soul were there. The last 2 years I was working on other things.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time at home. I held meetings, in the hot tub. I was growing a beard. Basically, I just wasn't feeling it anymore.
So why do you think the majority of acquisitions don't work?
I think the majority of acquisitions don't work because the large companies that make the decisions, they succumb to pressure of investors. They don't listen to their customers, and they lose patience quickly. That is what happens, right? So unless they're protected, unless they're somewhat siloed, and there's some sort of clawback agreements, those acquisitions don't work.
What's so weird to me is they keep happening though.
Yeah.
So it's why do they don't work, but they keep freaking happening?
It's funny that you say that. Like I look back at Voodoo and the whole acquisition that happened. Basically, they blew up an opportunity to own the gaming space, right? And then after that, I left Voodoo, and Razer, who was making keyboards and mice, started making laptops. They took a lot of the IP that we were building with Intel, and they started creating their own notebooks. Now Razer has 80% of the market share in China for gaming accessories. They're a multi-billion-dollar company now in valuation. They're going to go public soon, and they own the premium space on PCs, right? Other than Apple. So you got Apple that owns a premium spot. You got Razer that owns a premium spot, and all these other companies are looking back and saying, what did we do wrong? So before I left Microsoft, about 3 months before, there was a person from HP that contacted me and said, hey, Rahul, we're actually looking at reviving, Omen, which is a product that we created, right? And I said, wow, that's interesting. He said, yeah, and I said, why are you calling me? He said, well, we'd like to show it to you and see what you think. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a mess, right? And so they came out to Redmond, and they brought the system out, and I was blown away with what they'd done.
Oh, wow.
They created an amazing product. They revived the sort of Voodoo DNA thinking, and they created a really thin and light notebook for gaming. It's beautiful. Like, they did an amazing job, and they're reviving what they screwed up and left, right? So so I guess maybe over time they realized they made a mistake,
Yeah.
and they got the right people. Like you have to have the right people who are persistent and patient to go
For
drive
sure.
something like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, from what I know, which is a little bit more on the outside, I think, from as a startup or an early stage company, and you work really hard and then you have this exit, it's almost like an exhale.
Mm-hmm.
And so in one way the team is, man, that was a journey.
Yeah.
But in another way, then there's just new management, totally new rules. It's just everything has got to be different, and it probably just in the end just feels weird and not fun.
I mean, look, I think culture is everything when it comes to building any company or any team. And if you can't maintain a culture, then you're in trouble. And if the company has to continually, express what their culture is, you're in trouble. The culture should be something that lives and breathes in the halls, right?
Yeah.
And some companies just have that, and others don't.
Yeah. I do want to get to your new project, but your experience at Microsoft Ventures must have been really cool.
It was great. The experience at Microsoft was kind of a weird experience for me because, think about this. I Voodoo started when I was out of high school. All I knew was that company, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I knew everything about building systems and, building a brand and all that stuff. But when it came to working inside a big company, I just had no experience doing it. I was at HP from the outside looking in, trying to influence the company.
Yeah.
And I had no desire to go to another big company, but somehow I got a great opportunity to go to Microsoft. And when I went there, I moved from Calgary to Seattle, right? And on day one there was a reorg, and I was supposed to be a GM for experience on Xbox, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Day one there was a reorg. I had a new boss. In the first 11 months, I had 4 bosses, and quickly realized they didn't know what to do with me, right? Like I was basically 3 months away from getting fired, right? Because I had really wasn't able to produce anything because it's a company where if I figured out, whereas if you're not producing, don't wait for the company to wait, to tell you where to go. You've got to figure it out.
Go do it.
So I came up with this crazy idea because I work with startups that we should set up a small fund to help small startups grow their businesses. Microsoft at the time had very little footprint, no footprint in startups, right? Nobody cared. Like no one was using their cloud.
Yeah.
People are all using Macs. They're just not paying attention to what's going on with Microsoft. So why don't we just go and invest in them and then help them grow their business and give them access to customers, right? So we started something called the Bing Fund. I built this proposal. It got floated around the company. I finally met with one of the presidents of the company who loved the proposal, and within 15 minutes he said, "Let's go make this happen." So I started the Bing Fund, and that just snowballed into Microsoft Ventures, where we had pulled together a bunch of people from across the company and built accelerators around the world.
Yeah.
And we helped companies build and grow, from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And didn't take any equity, right? We just
So it was no equity.
No equity.
And so what was the form of the investment?
It was cash or in kind kind of thing.
Okay.
So it was basically we'd give them tech. We sometimes we'd give them cash. Some companies we invested in that I drove many of the cash investments. And in fact, one of them I ended up acquiring and started Unicorn. But we can.
Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's interesting. And so what did you take from, I guess, would you have called yourself a VC at the time? Or what would you?
You could say that, but I mean, I wouldn't call myself sort of a VC as much as I would say we were, we were sort of like an incubator with money, right? So we would help incubate companies and mentor them and give them access to capital and sometimes make investments ourselves. But at the end of the day, with Microsoft behind the companies, everybody wanted to invest in these deals.
Yeah.
So, I just got off the email thread with a lady who used to work for me in China, who ran the Microsoft Ventures Accelerator in China. We've had 118 companies go through this accelerator, like in the past, 2.5 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And the combined valuation of these companies today is $4.5 billion.
That's great.
Yeah, it's insane, right? It's actually not just great; it's ridiculous, right? And it's because of just how the market is going in China.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we did some good things. Yeah.
What did you look for in companies that you ended up funding or choosing?
Yeah. So like any startup, anytime I talk to founders or whatever, I always look for first you have to make sure that the team understands the problem that they're solving and how big the problem is, and they're able to articulate that in a sentence. And then you look at the team, and I would personally look for a balanced team. So I'd look for teams that had creative people, engineering, and business at the table, and that they were able to produce a product on their own, and get some early traction. So that's kind of what I would look for.
Right.
Yeah.
What, through that experience running Microsoft Ventures, how did that add value to you as an entrepreneur?
That was big. So the formula that we built was basically helping startups build a company, but then get connected to large companies, right? So imagine Voodoo, where we did it all ourselves. There was no accelerators, no incubators, no VCs. We built a brand, and then we got connected to a big company and sold, right?
Yeah.
But we basically took that model and said, like, what if we went to Microsoft's customer base, which is massive, the largest footprint in the enterprise, and we started, short-circuiting the connection between these startups and these big companies to help drive their innovation, right? And we figured out a way that made it work. You find the right people in the organization. Innovation doesn't have to be from the inside; it can happen on the outside. You find like-minded people internally who would call themselves entrepreneurs, and you connect these people together to see what would happen. And we invented that, and that formula worked out so well that I took that exact same formula when we started Unicorn and immediately did a deal with a $12 billion wagering company, on day two.
Right.
And it just completely changed our 2 days. It changed our company completely.
You did that deal before you had a product?
Sort of. So you want to get into that?
Yeah, let's transition.
So after I left HP, as I said, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I just kind of sat around trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I built some technology with some friends from Berlin that combines betting with video games, because we like to play games against each other. We're like, I'll bet you $5, that I'll win. And so we came up with this platform that had anti-cheat built into it. It had a client that worked really well, and it had the best back-end system that we could have imagined, and a matching system. And it works on games like Unreal Tournament. At the time, it worked with Wolfenstein, and now works with games like Counter-Strike. And you could put money in your account, and they put money in their account, and you could watch as your money went up or down based on the type of kills or action that's happening in the game.
Right. So is that like it was all automatic? So if you had
a kill, all automatic. Yeah, it was all automatic. So it withdraw from the account, put it in the other person's account. It was really cool. And we ran some pilots with it. At the peak, I think we had something like 10,000 users, using it. But we decided to shelve it. This was before I started at Microsoft. Okay. We shelved it because user acquisition was tough, and then also just keeping them on the platform and stuff. It was just way ahead of its time. Yeah. So shelved it, and then when I was at Microsoft. The second investment we made, first investment we made was in a company called Buddy.com, which is Dave McLaughlin. Yeah, great guy. Yeah. He was the first investment we made, and he helped us sort of get the program off the ground. He met me when I was starting the Bing Fund. I said, Dave, you're going to be the first investment we make. And he said, okay, let's do it. He knew Microsoft just doesn't work as fast as as he thought it would. And we went and got it done. Shortly after that, we invested in another Australian company called Pinion. Okay. And Pinion is a company that has a network of gaming communities around the world that helps them monetize their servers. Okay. So at the time, they had about 1 million users in 100 countries worldwide. They now have, peak is about 10 million users in 100 countries worldwide. And so in November, when I left Microsoft, I made an offer to buy Pinion, right? And I structured it in a way that was super creative, brought the CEO over as my co-founder. Awesome. We did a really, really creative deal. And then I bought the asset that I helped start years ago and brought that team on from Berlin onto Unicorn. So we took the whole betting technology thing, we took the communities thing, and we came up with this big vision for Unicorn that, we're looking at esports in general. Yeah. And esports is mind-blowingly blowing up, right? It's just getting bigger and bigger. And when you look at the numbers, like the total addressable market for esports is absolutely huge. And there's a really, really big bubble of people. So that our customers are between the ages of 18 and 32, but there's a massive, exponentially larger bubble between the ages of 12 and 18. That's just getting older, and it's only going to get bigger from there. So we looked at the space and said, we want to make esports more engaging, right? And so when people ask me what Unicorn is, I tell them, we want to build a theme park for esports, right? And in our theme park, our mission is to increase the engagement and heighten the experience of watching and participating in esports, right? So the one way to do that is through betting, and that's where we started. We started with real money betting, and then we kind of went from there.
Okay, and so hot topic.
Yeah.
So in the U.S., it's pretty much illegal at this point in terms of real money betting?
It's completely illegal
Okay.
to bet on any sport in the U.S.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, look, I don't care, and I'll tell you where we operate and stuff, but I'll tell you why I don't care. So, the U.S. is a funny market. It's a place where, in Washington State, I can go buy an arsenal of guns, loaded, right? I can buy bags of weed, and if I place a $20 bet on the Seahawks, I could be in trouble, right?
Yeah.
It's completely messed up, right? And it's also a place where, through lobbying and protectionism, the casinos, who were very concerned about their core business, back in 2006, they were really worried about online poker, right? And they saw this coming, and so there's a lot of lobbying going on, a lot of protectionism going on, where effectively online gambling became illegal, right? And as a result of that, there was a loophole in there for games of skill, right? And so what do smart people do? Smart people look at loopholes and they try and figure out their way around it, and they came up with fantasy, right? And fantasy is considered a game of skill. Effectively, what's happened in the U.S. is the word gambling has been softened. You can soften it to betting, you can then soften it more to wagering, and then you can go even further and call it fantasy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the UK and Australia, they're laughing and saying, like, what the hell, guys? It's all gambling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's part of culture. In the UK and Australia, betting on sports it's just one of those things that you do. It's regulated, which is great, and it's actually very good for competitive integrity and all of that stuff, and they actually give back to the industries that they operate in. Yet in the US, we got fantasy, which is completely unregulated, right? And you've got a loophole that people went through and are building businesses on. And there's advertising all over the airwaves. Yeah. You watch the NFL Network, you watch ESPN, all you see is fantasy football, this and fantasy that. And look, it's gambling, right? And now they're starting to realize that, oh shit, maybe we should have regulated this. So you ask me if I care. I don't care, but I can tell you that without regulation, if you're exploiting a loophole to run a business and then you're in an unregulated area, you're setting yourself up for trouble.
Yes.
And so we believe in regulation. We believe in responsible betting. We don't as much as I like fantasy, I want them to succeed but I want them to be regulated so that there's an even playing field for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So what do you see happen in that specific area in the next couple of years? Like, do you think?
So I think I'm anticipating that I think that there'll be a level playing field, and they'll realize, that we're crazy, that we're making this illegal. We should regulate it because we're losing a lot of revenue to black markets and that sort of thing. Let the country make money off of this. Let the industry profit from it, and the industry can give back to competitive integrity and anti-cheating and all of that stuff, and just make sports betting legal, right? Yeah. I think that should happen. I think it probably will happen. And meanwhile, we actually have a real business. So, on day one, we knew all of this was going to be a problem, right? Yeah. The notion that our skill-based platform could be legal in the US, so the one where you bet against your friends could be legal potentially. We haven't launched that yet, right? What we have launched is a spectator platform. What we did was we created the first, most comprehensive sports book on esports in the world. Now, we have 8 games on it. It used to take us 6 to 9 hours to create the odds for one tournament, League of Legends tournament, right? It took a very long time. It was all paper, pad, scratching, doing formulas and all this stuff. And now it takes us minutes. We've automated this. We put it on the cloud. It's all but automated. It's very close. It takes us minutes, but there's still a lot of human intervention that has to go into it. But we're getting better and better at automating it. And we took this, and we also have some other technology that we're building. And we went to, we said, like, we gotta get past this regulatory and liquidity issue, right? Because no investor is going to want to touch gambling. They don't want to touch the space because it's just so sketchy. So we went out and found a partner. We looked at some of the biggest gambling companies in the world, and Tabcorp by far was the best because they're a $12 billion publicly traded, very transparent wagering company. For the last 10 out of 11 years, they've been rated the most responsible wagering company in the world by the Dow Jones. And
where are they out of?
Australia. They have over 3,000 physical locations where people can go in and bet on horse racing and sports and all that stuff. And then another 3,000 of like pubs that they're in, so 6,000 plus locations. They're across Europe, across the UK, and they want to grow their core business. But you know, they know that it's hard to grow this business, and they look at esports and they think, wow, it's a great opportunity for us to grow outside of the markets that we operate in. Plus, you know, these guys, meaning us, we have the DNA, we have the community, we're putting all of this together in a great offering. They thought, like, let's do a deal. So we did a deal with them. We became their global esports partner. They invested in our seed round. They invested in our Series A, and they have been an amazing partner for us. They opened up their licenses, so we're licensed in the UK, we're licensed in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, the Isle of Man. We have more licenses coming, and meanwhile we're building other products at the same time. So
that's amazing. So you smartly, early on, you went and chose a partner that was very respected.
Yeah.
So
sure.
the strategy was almost like, let's essentially become like, let's add into their, like, when their name is said, our name can be said.
Yeah, like so when we go to, like, you know, talk to any of the major casino operators in Vegas or whatever, and they know who we're partnered with, Tabcorp, they immediately, there's a level of respect that just goes up, you know, higher than ever because they're a really well respected company. So we went and did that, and, you know, as I said, we've got a great relationship with them to the point now where they're allocating people to us. You know, they're allocating engineers to us, marketing people, all of that stuff to sort of help and build our business. And you know, we love them, they love us. It's a great relationship. You know, and we're working on some unreal tech. Like we are, what makes Unicorn stand out from other companies is we're a technology company first. And you know, the fantasy companies are marketing companies first.
For sure.
So we spend a lot of our money on tech.
Man.
So get this. So on day one, you know, I pulled Pinion and Playall, put them together. Carl and I got together, met with Tabcorp. Day 8, we had raised $3 million. Right. It was actually $2.5 million, but we had an over allocation. So we closed the extra 500,000. You know, a few days later. And then, you know, we started to build out our tech and launch a very basic platform. Then, you know, shortly after that, we started to get some traction. You know, we're all over the media. I was on CNBC on day 4, and then I think I've been on CNBC like 4 times since. It's just crazy, right?
And is that just just because the industry is
just because the industry where we're going? You know, just the buzz around Unicorn. You know, there's a lot of like rumblings about what we're doing and stuff, and then, you know, the PR has been great, and then shortly after that, you know, got a call from Mark Cuban after being on CNBC. He invested in our Series A. Binary Capital, who invested in Twitter, like these guys Jonathan Teo and Justin Kalbach are known for early investing in Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, you know, a number of other, you know, companies like Grubhub and TaskRabbit and stuff like that. They really liked us, and they were mentoring us from the beginning. So Jonathan and Justin both have been mentoring us since November, and they led our Series A round, and you know, and we also have people like Sherry Redstone and Liz Murdoch, and you know, just a great group of investors that came on board. So we raised a total of $10 million, and we're still going, and there's, you know, since been a lot of inbound interest. So
yeah, any tips on if anyone's gonna pitch Mark Cuban?
Well, I mean, you know, the ideal situation is to have him call you.
Which sounds like it happened.
Which sounds like it happened. It's exactly what happened. So, but, you know, Mark is a very pragmatic guy. He is a no-nonsense type person.
Right.
You know, he looked at a deck. Basically, he emailed me after a CNBC interview and said, you know, esports is great, congratulations. And I emailed him back saying, yeah, thanks a lot. You know, I would have called you, but we're way ahead of where, you know, you normally would invest, we're thinking. And he said, yeah, I normally invest in seed, but send me your deck if you want, and I'll take a look. And I sent it to him, and he wrote back, I'm in, just like that, and CC'd his team, and he just moves very quickly. Very, obviously, the very connected person, and he helps us actively sort of with our business, you know, where we need help. And all of our investors are like that, right? They're very active, and they help us build and grow. So I think probably the best question you could ask is like, what kind of investor should you look for?
Yeah.
And my number one recommendation is not your friends and family. Like, your friends and family should come after you bring on a strategic investor. And then once you've done that, then you can create opportunity for your friends and family rather than risk, right?
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's actually stay on that real quick. Yeah, because I was going to ask, like, of your time as evaluating, what do you see as like maybe the biggest mistake that early stage startups and like maybe first time founders, what's the biggest mistake when
number one mistake is they go to their friends and family and ask for money, right? Before they built anything. That's the biggest mistake you could ever do, because you're basically raising money to pay yourself an income so you can so you can do whatever it is that you want to do, right? That's a huge mistake. That's it. Yeah. And I think I've had people, when I was at Microsoft, I used to always get people on the inside asking, I want to go start a company. Will Microsoft invest in it? And I'm thinking, what do you mean? I want to quit my job, and I want to go start a company, but I need investment first. So what do you need investment for? So I can pay myself an income. Well, you're not an entrepreneur. Stay with your job. Trust me, because getting inside of Microsoft with a job is very hard.
Yeah.
And if you quit your job, you're going to fail. So, stay.
Right. So how would you describe an entrepreneur then? Like,
entrepreneur is somebody who has a very high tolerance for risk.
Yeah.
Risk versus reward. Somebody who's willing to quit a GM job where you could make, upwards of $1 million a year to go pay yourself nothing, to go build something.
Exactly.
That's an entrepreneur, right? So somebody who wants to go and do something because they really care about it.
Yeah. And what you find is most people, like you said, they get a little fascinated with the idea.
Yeah.
But they just don't have the stomach.
Yeah, they don't have the stomach for it. And as you get older, let's face it, it's harder.
Yeah.
It's harder because your risk tolerance goes lower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So. Let's talk about e-games and esports in general. It's just blowing up right now. So where is the industry at now, and where do you see it going in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so the industry is at a point where in the last 2 years it's been kind of bubbling, and it just kind of burst out in the last year or so, thanks to Twitch and Riot Games and Valve. Valve being an amazing, Pacific Northwest company, and what they've been able to do for this industry is unbelievable. They, so you've got a fan base about the size of the NHL currently, right? By 2017, this fan base, and it's a rabid fan base, is going to be about as big as the NFL.
Wow.
You're going to see Ivy League universities like Yale, Harvard, Stanford, whatever. They're all going to offer scholarships for high-performing esports students. Because they're going to create intercollegiate, teams, and they know that the high performers on those teams are going to be high performing students because they're very good at math, they work well under pressure, they have great leadership skills, they collaborate well. All of those things are needed in order to be a winner on a game like Dota 2.
Yeah.
So that's going to be happening, right? And then on top of that, you're looking at a flood of money coming in from VCs and angel investors and pioneers or innovators and entrepreneurs coming to space to figure out new ways of building businesses, and then you have this kind of this thing that's happening in gaming, and the whole economics of video games is changing. So that's.
So when I look out, and I'm just kind of coming from a traditional sports fan perspective, and why we look at Russell Wilson or Sherman or you name the athlete, and we're in awe of their performance. It's because it's it's out of this world physical ability. I think about the future of esports, and there's going to be celebrities in that too, and it's a different skill set.
Yeah,
but it's a total different it's such a different realm because it's not like they're 6'8" and like a LeBron James. They're totally different. So. I'm just it's kind of unique too.
Well, so putting the stereotypes of what a gamer looks like aside, right? Because I'll tell you, for example, you saw my partner, he plays a lot of games, and he also is a professional bodybuilder, right? You just would never guess if you saw him on the street. You think he was a rugby player because that's what he used to do.
Yeah.
If you if you look at the players, like Faker is a good example of a great professional, player who is mind-blowingly good, and he's fun to watch. He's got a great attitude. He has a massive following. Tens of millions of people love and revere this guy.
Yeah.
He's got 2 shoe sponsorships.
Shoes,
yeah. He's
right.
got lots of sponsors going after him, and he's making millions of dollars a year playing games professionally. I think the professionals in esports, these esports athletes, are people that, by the way, they also take care of themselves too. Physically, you have to take care of yourself a little bit in order to be able to have the twitch movement and the
right.
mind control that you do in these games. But they're effectively role models, and so when I look at Russell Wilson, I'm not looking at him for his physical ability. In fact, I don't, because if I looked at him for his physical ability, I think, well, Peyton Manning is probably a better quarterback, or Tom Brady's a better quarterback, right? But Russell Wilson exudes leadership skills and exudes an attitude of being humble and just being a great person as well. He has great leadership skills on the field, and that's what makes him who he is today, right? So I look at that and I think that's the kind of person that I want to follow.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I also go back again, sports analogy, but I go back to barely remembering the basically the start of ESPN and SportsCenter, and actually back then you think about go back even further in the 50s and 60s, professional athletes weren't paid very highly at all.
Right.
And the whole industry, the whole professional athlete industry and sponsorships and all this the multi-million-dollar salaries and then all this multi-million-dollar sponsorships is fairly new. And I think we're seeing the start of this new industry that you're saying, like you said,
it's exactly.
Right.
So just put it this way: if the fan base is about the same size as the NHL today, the revenue being generated in the space is about the same size as the Toronto Maple Leafs. So the opportunity is there, right? The opportunity is this massive delta in revenue opportunity between the fan base and exactly what's being monetized. The opportunity is massive.
Right now, so let's tie it back to Unicorn. And where do you see yourselves positioning in that industry? Yeah,
so look, we're at the amazing convergence point. We've grown our community from 1 million users to nearly 10 million users. We have a betting business that's growing, right? And we're trying to be, like I mentioned, we're like a theme park for esports, and everything we do is about heightening the experience for esports and increasing engagement. You're going to see us launch more products, create more content, and more technology around that, around doing that, following that mission. And we'll be here to stay. When I think about what the vision for Unicorn is, I think, when people utter the word esports, they're going to think about Unicorn.
Right.
So,
yeah. Let's transition a little bit into leadership, CEO. How do you sum up if someone was like, well, what do you do and what do you think the job of a CEO is?
Sure. The job of a CEO is to basically be the foundation of the culture. Create a healthy environment where people live, breathe, eat, sleep, and love what they do. It's about being humble and being empathetic to the people around you, and creating an aspirational vision that people can get behind. And more than anything else, just hiring people that are way smarter than you to go do that, right? And that's not always easy because you have to be able to let go in certain areas, and you have to give people the opportunity to succeed or fail.
How do you handle the up and down? As you know, some days are just incredible, and some days you think crap. You're done, and you think you're this is it.
I wear my emotions on my sleeve.
So how do you handle that, man?
Yeah. I think you just have to you have to be steady about everything that you do. Sometimes we're all human. We react in certain ways, but I've learned over the years that to try and control the way I react in front of people. Every now and then I slip up, not in a mean way, but in a way that I might say something I shouldn't have said.
Right.
And it freaks people out, and I just have to remember that. I think it just comes with experience. I think there's young entrepreneurs out there who never had experience like I've had, who do great, but they do great by surrounding themselves with great people, so.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough subject, but how do you deal with sometimes you can get dragged into like a more depressive state, or like myself and others, I know that people just deal with that, right? And we hear it all the time in our industry now. People are struggling with depression, or once negative numbers come, like, how do we handle it? How are we supposed to deal with it?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. Like I had, I just had this very same discussion with an entrepreneur who from Seattle, who has a failed startup, and and this person is at the risk of getting depressed, but probably not, because this person has a very strong head on their shoulders. But when I think about what happened when I was at HP and things started to sort of fall apart, and I think about what I did when I was at home and just kind of sat around doing nothing kind of thing, that's kind of the low point for me. The way you handle it is by not being envious of others, right? Envy is it's a horrible emotion. Being envious and jealous of people is never a good thing. It's always good to be kind of happy for people as they succeed, and learn from people that are doing great things, and know what you're good, and know your limitations, essentially, right? But look, if things fail, it's completely okay as long as you recognize it fast enough.
Right.
Because if you recognize it, you can go do something else. That's what you do. You get up and you go build something else. And that happens often in the tech space, and that happens often in the world of startups. And now, man, I don't know. I mean, the space is changing. The world of funding is changing. When you see companies like Quirky and going out, and then Evernote, who knows what's going to happen with those guys, and then you've got all this other stuff happening in the VC space where there's a lot of exuberance, before fundamentals. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a change. I don't think it's going to blow up completely, but I think that people are going to start looking at how do you build a real business. So my suggestion is to those who are at the point of sort of depression and things are going down, and they should just cut it off if things are failing, and they know they can't turn it around, and try something different. Try going and getting a job somewhere and just learning what it's like inside a big organization. Right. That changed my life. It's probably the best thing I did.
I bet, yeah. My perspective, I've dealt with it a little bit. My first real startup, didn't really go anywhere after a couple of years, and for me though, I look at it as it was just the start of my journey. And I made a ton of connections, and who's to say that failure is not the most important thing for you to go through so that you can then build a better company? Right. In reality, it can't all be great. No, right? You gotta go through that stuff.
Exactly, you gotta go through that. And I almost went through failure when I was at Microsoft, right? As I said, 11 months, I had 4 bosses. They didn't know what to do with me, and I was almost out the door. And so you learn from that, and you pivot, and you think, what am I going to do to go add value, or what am I going to do that I can do that no one else can, sort of thing. And so you have to learn from failure and change it quickly.
So what do you think about the funding situation in the market right now?
Well, we're kind of in a, knock on wood, a fortunate position where we're getting a lot of inbound interest now, right? But I have seen situations where companies are not getting the same type of love because of the business that they're in, or because they're not getting traction, or that sort of thing. I think what has to happen is, you have to get traction, and you have to demonstrate traction. That's what you should focus on. You shouldn't focus on what your last round is. You shouldn't focus on fundraising. You should focus on getting traction. So that way you can get funding. Because if you build something great and you're getting some traction, there'll be somebody out there with money that's going to invest in you. If all you're focused on is fundraising, so you can pay yourself and your team an income, you're done. It's over. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. What about the just the weird shifts in the market, the late stage getting so much money, and
well, you know why that's happening, right? The reason that later stage companies are getting more money and early stage companies are finding it hard to raise money is because VC funds are focusing on their bets, right? And they want to follow up on their bets. They want to see their bets win. So they're starting to do that, and that's what usually happens in times like this when the market is kind of questionable. But every now and then there's a winner that comes out, and that's a new winner that everybody wants to get in on, and it just happens. So that's why.
Yeah. Do you fear that there will be a class of startups that just for some reason they're left out in the rain, or do you think that's natural selection and it would happen anyway regardless of the funding?
It's totally natural selection. Okay. And when I talk to entrepreneurs from Seattle who say, oh, the VCs here are terrible, or whatever, so like if they're terrible or not listening to you, either A, you have a bad product, or B, they don't invest in that type of area. Go find somebody who does. It's a big world out there, right? There's plenty of people. Yeah. We got investors from Moscow. We have investors from London, New York, Silicon Valley.
Right.
We got investors from everywhere except Seattle. We got one guy in Seattle who works at one of the firms. He works at Ignition, and I brought him in because he's just a nice guy, and he put a very small amount in, but just a really nice guy, and he's also sort of a figure in Seattle that probably represents something for us in the future. You never know what will happen in the future, but we never had investment from Seattle. I did talk to a couple people, but I realized very quickly, not that they were unintelligent or whatever, but they just didn't understand the space. They don't invest in that space. They invest in different types of companies. So.
Yeah, what I've learned, what we learned recently is, and every founder needs to do this their own way, but very quickly you find if they're even the type of person, if they're looking for this investment.
That's right.
Are they the right partner or not?
That's right.
Rather than wasting all your time trying to pitch someone that is gonna say no.
And by the way, since this has happened, I even had investors from Seattle are approaching us now and coming to us and trying to express interest in our next round, and it's too late. The answer is pretty simple. You weren't there at the beginning. We have existing investors who want in. We have other investors who are going to add big value. It's probably too late. We might be able to get you a little bit, but not enough. I did a sort of a talk at the Pioneer Summit in Silicon Valley a couple of weeks ago. I was me, and it was Matt Mickelson, who is the founder of Gunner. His wife is the CEO of Gunner. Actually, he's the chairman of Gunner. His wife is the founder and creator of Gunner Optics. And he was also an early investor in our company. He introduced me to Jonathan Teo, who is the founder of Binary, right? Yeah. Jonathan was interviewing both of us about Unicorn, and he was talking about Unicorn, the space, esports, blah, blah, blah. And it was in front of a whole bunch of VCs and CEOs from Silicon Valley and that sort of thing. At the end of it, somebody from one of the VC firms that we met in the Valley prior to our Series A came up and said, we had our heads up our ass, we really want to invest in you guys now, we'd love to do something with you. And this is a company that spent a lot of time with us over a month and pretty much just didn't move fast enough, right? And then in the end they said, we can't get in for whatever reason, but it was a waste of time. Now they're coming back, and that's usually what ends up happening. So
that's crazy. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you. We're about out of time.
Thanks.
So
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Good seeing you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Done.
Nice job, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, man. Cheers.
Great combo, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.